Hey guys, this is going to be my how I make egghead videos video. What I'm going to do is make a live video, then we'll edit it, then we'll take a look at kind of what I've got going on in my environment and any tips I might have for you guys. So what I'm going to do is take a drink of water, uh, clear my throat, and make the video. One often overlooked and highly performant method for inserting HTML into our documents is insert adjacent HTML. I'm going to get us started by setting up a quick style here of O for original, and I'm just going to give that an outline of 1 pixel solid red. We'll go ahead and get that onto the page, and inside of that guy we're going to say original. So we'll set up our script. And the first thing we're going to do here is identify our target element. So if our target equals document.query selector, and we'll be selecting the .o class. So let's go ahead and save that, and we can see we've got our original on the page. Now to use insert adjacent HTML, we start with our DOM element dot insert adjacent HTML. Now that's a function. It takes 2 arguments. The first one is a string that identifies the position where we want to insert our HTML. So I'm going to start off with before begin. I'm going to follow that with our second argument, which is the HTML that we want to insert. So I'm going to have a bold tag here. I'm just going to say before begin. So let's try that out. And we can see that we get exactly what we expect. We get our before begin bold tag before the beginning of our original div. So let's copy this and try another position. This will be after begin. And we can see that after begin actually lives inside of the original div, but before any of its content. So it lives right here before our content. So let's try another one here. This will be before end. So before end and before end. Save that, and we can see that before end lives at the end of the original div, but right before the ending of it, so it lives right after our inner HTML. And the last one we can take a look at is after end. And we can see that after end lives past the ending of our original element. Okay, so we've got our video. I'm going to go ahead and set our input to mono since the microphone only records on one channel. I'm going to bring this up, shrink that down a bit, and zoom into our waveform here. So one thing I do very often is this. Tap my mic pop filter 3 times to know that I'm about to start or restart something. I didn't really do that in this video that often. I do have quite a few pauses I need to take out, but this right here is going to be one often overlooked the beginning of our video. So I'm going to go ahead and strip out all the stuff where I was talking to you guys. Bring all this back to the beginning. We'll zoom in a bit more here and just kind of step through the video. One often overlooked and highly performant of O for original, and I'm just going to give that an outline of 1 pixel solid. So actually typo there, and then when I typo I usually just stop talking, fix it, so that in post I can come back and clean that up. So there's our correctly spelled string. All right, let's try that out. 1 pixel solid red. Yeah, that's fine. Pixel solid red. We'll go ahead and get that onto the page, and inside of that guy we're going to say original. So we'll set up our script, and the first thing we're going to do here is identify our target element. So if our target equals document should have a shortcut for query selector, but I don't right now, so just cut out the part until I start talking again, and I'll just kind of snap in document query selector. And so, I mean, clearly, you know, it just jumps to it, but as long as it's not too jarring and it keeps the video going forward at a reasonable, consistent pace, I'm usually okay with that. So we'll see it kind of, I'll start typing query selector and then it'll just be there. It, you know, it looks like maybe I have a snippet for that. So var target equals document dot query selector, and we'll be selecting the .o class. So I'm not going to be able to get rid of that typo because I just kept talking over it. I mean, I could really zoom in here and try, but it doesn't really matter. Selecting the .o class. So let's go and save that, and we can see we've got our original on the page. Now, to use insert adjacent HTML, we start with our DOM element dot insert adjacent HTML. Now that's a function. It takes two arguments. The first one is a string that identifies the position where we want to insert our HTML. So I'm going to start off with before begin. Now this right here is me clearing my throat all the way up to here. So I'm just going to go ahead, split this here, and drag this all the way back to about there. I'll bring this guy over. See how that looks. Before begin. I'm going to follow that with our second argument, which is the HTML that we want to insert. So I'm going to have a bold tag here. I'm just going to say before begin. So let's try that out. And we can see that we get exactly what we expect. We get our before begin bold tag original div. So let's copy this and try another position. So a nice big pause right here. And what we're going to do is get to right. Well, let's just right once I've got before highlighted there. Let's try that. And try another position. This will be after. Yeah, that's okay. So even though I'm jumping directly to the point where I've already highlighted the text, it doesn't feel that weird watching it. And, you know, just thinking about where the viewer is looking, they see the highlight, they're drawn to that, and then they see the change. It doesn't really affect anything, and again, it kind of keeps the pace of the video moving consistently. So let's copy this and try another position. This will be after begin. Nice big pause here again. So going for the same thing, just kind of draw the user's eye to it. So there where I've got the whole thing highlighted, and right before I delete it. And this is really just shaving down milliseconds, and again, just kind of keeping the flow moving and reducing silence. After begin. That's a lot of silence. Position. This will be after begin. And we can see that it's not that bad because we're waiting for the browser to load. So. And we can see that after begin actually lives inside of the original div, but before any of its content. So it lives right here before our content. So let's try another one here. This will be before end. So before end. Bit of a gap coming up here. And so we'll do the same thing. Split that. Jump to where we've got the content we're going to change highlighted and strip out the rest. So before end and before end. So one thing to point out there is there's like a half a second typo there, not even a half a second, where before I have a space. I have a space between before and end. So before. So if I was really trying to save time here, I'd zoom way in here. End. So before. And before I do that space, I get back up right after I say the word. And I'm not going to be able to catch it perfectly because I can't, edit it. I don't want to take the time to try to separate the sound from the audio or sound from the video, but what I could do is just clip out right there. So this video doesn't really require that, but just, to show you sometimes how I might do this. Let's back up. Try another one here. This will be before end. So before end. So it just, again, it saves a millisecond. It's not that big of a deal, but sometimes it's required. End, so before end, and before end. Save that, and we can see that before end lives at the end of the original div, but right before the ending of it, so it lives right after our inner HTML. And the last one we can inner HTML. So again, we're gonna split this. Again, this one's not really, doesn't really need a ton of editing, but I just want to show you, how I might go about this, especially if I had a very long video. Shaving off milliseconds all along the timeline really, helps that overall right after length. Inner HTML. And the last one we can take a look at is after end. So same thing here. I'm going to go ahead and end. Jump to where it was highlighted right after I stopped talking. So split there. And you'll notice I don't line up perfectly with the waveform. It starts to feel unnatural if sounds don't trail off, but rather, just cut off abruptly. You don't want to do that. So I leave a little gap there, taking a breath or ending a word that's natural. So we're going to jump to right there. That is after end. That's a little skippy, a little jumpy, but it's after end. Could make that smoother. After end. So maybe just jump back a extra character, and you get to see me capturing that that first character as my last capture there. So let's see if that flows a little better for inner HTML. And the last one we can take a look at is after end. Much better. Then we've got all this dead space here, so we'll do the same thing there. So we get done editing. I'm not talking any of this time. You can hear the typing, but since there's no talking, I can kind of get away with, let's say, once we make that change, let's make a split there. And now we're over here. So we'll do the same thing. We will leave the bit where I capture the E, and it'll flow a bit more naturally. And the last one we can take a look at is after end. And we can see that after end lives past the ending of our original element. Cool. We have our video. Let's trim this up to here, and we're all set to go to export that guy. Okay, so our editing is done, and I know that's quite boring, but that's how it works. 3-minute video, 10 or 15 minutes of editing. One thing I'll mention is, I don't know if you guys can pick it up or not, but there's a ton of noise going on in my house right now. I do tend to try to do my videos really late at night or very early in the morning, just due to the fact that I have a very loud household with a lot of people in it. But when I'm editing, it doesn't really matter unless I need to re-record something for a second. So recording when it's quiet, editing when it's not important for it to be quiet. So a couple things about my environment. Font size. As a general rule, my font size is usually about the size of this tab, and that's obviously specific to my actual theme. But I will say one thing I do sometimes. So let's say I've got my code here that I'm going to be typing. If my goal was to keep it all on the screen, I would find that size in my kind of scratch pad here, and since it'll increase the size in both of these, then I can go back and start from scratch and know that it's going to work. Now my goal is not necessarily to always keep the font or keep all the code on the screen. It's nice when I can do it, but it's not a requirement. So what else? The font coloring that I use is pretty specific to making Egghead videos. So here's an older video that I made where I was using, I guess, the default Sublime theme. And you can see like this red on a dark background just starts to get really fuzzy. So this theme that I'm using now, which I think is called Afterglow, but I've certainly altered it a bit, comes across much, much better. We get crisper, definition on this dark background with these colors. When I do have the, folders view open, I've actually altered the theme here as well to make those quite a bit larger than they normally would be. You also notice that I don't have the taskbar thing, the Mac taskbar or whatever that's called. So I'm using dual monitors. I've got that taskbar thing on the other monitor, but when you have dual monitors, you can turn it off on one of them. Another thing I do is use snippets. So for whatever reason, typing insert adjacent HTML causes me to typo a lot. So I just created a snippet, ISA, and then I can go on about what I'm doing. So the other thing I have in place here is I'm actually running browser sync. Let's see if I can get the browser on the page. I'm going to go ahead and stop that, and I'll show you the alias that I have for that. So the alias I have for that is browser sync, start, files, all the files, server, and then no notify, which turns off the little growl notifications. So if I'm not doing a project that requires a build, something like this, and I just want to have live reload, I simply run BSA, and that actually opened up in another window, but there we go. I have my live reload up and running. Trying to think if there's anything else. So when I'm typing something, I pause a lot. I just leave, big blanks. So for example, when I was doing this part and I knew it was going to take me a second to type after end and then after end again, a lot of times what I'll do is something like this. I'll say, and here we'll use after end. So I paused, I said, here we'll use, then I typed, and then I said what it is. And that allows me to just come back later, trim out that empty space or speed up the typing without having to, mess with the audio itself. I'm really not a big fan of having to silence parts of it. I'd rather just kind of clip things out and see if I can get them feeling natural. So let's look at my physical environment. Okay, so physical environment. So like I said, I've got dual monitors here. You can see a taskbar on that one, but not on this one. When it comes to keyboards, I normally use a DOS keyboard. This keyboard happens to have, I don't know, cherry blue switches. It's super loud. So when I make a video, I'm sorry that was so shaky. When I make a video, I tend to use this wired Mac keyboard, and you can actually see I place it on a towel because my desk makes a really hollow noise, and apparently I type very hard. Now, I sometimes make a video with the audio first, and then I go ahead and use my DOS keyboard. And what I do is I put the mic right up to the keyboard. I don't talk at all. I just type everything and record the screen. And then when I do the voiceover, I turn that audio track way down. But when I'm doing a live video, or a one-take video, or whatever you want to call it, I go ahead and use a quieter keyboard. What else do we got here? We got my mic right up here, right up in my face. Got some water. Got my coffee this morning. I keep a notepad here, and you'll notice I've got some standard kind of iPhone headphones or earbuds. I'm listening directly from the Scarlett 2i2 monitor port right now. But what I'll do when I'm all done is I'll also give it a listen on the earbuds just to see how it sounds overall. Keep a notepad here in case I have any notes. Something kind of crazy I did one time is in order to record an actual hardware device, I actually pushed some nails into my desk to keep the thing still while I recorded it with a document camera, which wasn't the best investment because I only used it once. Hopefully I'll use it again someday. So that is my physical environment.